In the quiet moments between words, something profound happens. A space opens where understanding can flourish, where connection transcends mere conversation. Yet in our hyper-connected world, this sacred pause has become increasingly rare. We live in an age of perpetual noise, endless notifications, competing voices, and the relentless urge to respond before we've truly heard. The result? A crisis of communication that leaves millions feeling isolated, misunderstood, and emotionally disconnected from those closest to them. But what if there existed a principle so fundamental, so transformative, that mastering it could revolutionize every relationship in your life? What if the key to deeper connections, more effective leadership, and genuine influence lay not in speaking louder, but in listening deeper? Today, we explore one of the most powerful concepts ever articulated about human communication, a principle that has guided world leaders, transformed organizations, and healed fractured relationships across cultures and generations. This wisdom comes from Stephen Covey's groundbreaking masterpiece, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and specifically from Habit 5, Seek first to understand, then to be understood. When Covey introduced the world to his revolutionary framework for personal effectiveness in 1989, he fundamentally changed how we think about success and human interaction. Among his 7 habits, the fifth stands as perhaps the most challenging and yet most rewarding to master, especially when it comes to establishing deeper, more meaningful relationships. It requires us to fundamentally shift our approach to human interaction, from autobiography to empathy, from judgment to curiosity, from winning arguments to building bridges. The principle appears deceptively simple: listen first, speak second. Yet beneath this simplicity lies a profound truth about human nature. We are hardwired to be understood. From our earliest moments, we seek acknowledgement, validation, and connection. When someone truly understands us, not just our words, but our feelings, our fears, our deepest concerns, something magical occurs. The walls of defense crumble, trust emerges, and genuine dialogue becomes possible. Consider the anatomy of most conversations. Two people, each carrying their own perspective, experiences, and agenda, engage in what resembles less a dialogue than parallel monologues. Person A speaks while person B mentally rehearses their response. Person B replies while person A evaluates, judges, and prepares their counterargument. The result is what communication experts call the illusion of communication, a surface-level exchange that leaves both parties feeling unheard and frustrated. This pattern manifests everywhere. In boardrooms where executives talk past each other, discussing solutions to different problems. In homes where family members retreat to separate corners, convinced no one understands their struggles. In friendships that gradually dissolve under the weight of accumulated misunderstandings. The cost is measured not just in failed projects or broken relationships, but in the profound human suffering that comes from chronic disconnection. The practice of empathetic listening represents nothing less than a paradigm shift. It requires what psychologists term decentering, the ability to step outside our own frame of reference and genuinely inhabit another person's perspective. This is not mere technique or communication strategy, it is a fundamental reorientation of how we engage with the world. True empathetic listening begins with what we might call the discipline of presence. In a culture addicted to multitasking, the simple act of giving someone our complete, undivided attention becomes revolutionary. This means silencing not just external distractions, the buzzing phone, the competing conversations, but the internal commentary that constantly evaluates, categorizes, and prepares responses. The neuroscience of listening reveals why this practice is so transformative. When we feel truly heard, our brains release oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone. Stress hormones like cortisol decrease, while areas associated with trust and emotional regulation become more active. We literally become neurologically primed for connection and collaboration. Yet empathetic listening goes beyond the neurological. It operates on four distinct levels, each more profound than the last. The first level involves hearing the actual words being spoken, the content, the facts, the surface message. Most conversations never progress beyond this level. The second level attends to the emotions underlying the words. Here, we listen for frustration masquerading as anger, fear presenting as aggression, or sadness disguised as withdrawal. A skilled, empathetic listener learns to hear not just what is said, but what is felt. The third level seeks to understand the values and beliefs driving both the words and emotions. Why does this matter so deeply to this person? What core principles or experiences are being triggered? What worldview shapes their interpretation of events? The fourth and deepest level involves recognizing the fundamental human needs being expressed. Behind every complaint lies an unmet need. Behind every criticism lies a desire for something better. Behind every outburst lies a person struggling to be understood, valued, or respected. This multi-layered approach to listening transforms not just our relationships but our ability to influence and lead. When people feel genuinely understood, they become remarkably open to influence. Not through manipulation or coercion, but through the natural human tendency to trust and collaborate with those who demonstrate genuine care for our perspective. The practice of withholding judgment represents perhaps the greatest challenge in empathetic listening. Our minds are meaning-making machines, constantly categorizing, evaluating, and drawing conclusions based on limited information. We hear a few sentences and believe we understand the entire situation. We observe a behavior and assume we know its motivation. We encounter a perspective that differs from ours and immediately begin formulating counter-arguments. This rush to judgment serves an important evolutionary function. It helps us quickly assess threats and opportunities in our environment. But in the realm of human relationships, premature judgment becomes the enemy of understanding. When we judge quickly, we stop listening deeply. When we stop listening deeply, we miss the subtleties, the context, the underlying humanity of the person before us. The antidote to premature judgment is what Buddhist teacher Suzuki Roshi called beginner's mind, approaching each conversation with curiosity rather than certainty. This means asking questions that genuinely seek to understand rather than to trap or prove points. Questions like, what led you to see it that way? What would need to change for this to feel better for you? What am I missing in my understanding of this situation? These questions signal something profound to the other person, that their perspective matters, that their experience is valid, that they are worth understanding. In a world where most people feel chronically misunderstood, this gift of genuine curiosity becomes transformative. The transition from understanding to being understood marks the second half of Habit 5, and it requires equal skill and intentionality. Having truly listened, having genuinely sought to understand another's perspective, we earn what Covey called psychological air, the right to be heard. But this right comes with responsibility. When we speak from a foundation of understanding, our words carry different weight. They demonstrate that we have considered the other person's viewpoint, that we respect their experience, that we are not simply waiting for our turn to talk. This creates what communication experts call psychological safety, an environment where people feel secure enough to engage in honest, vulnerable dialogue. The language of understanding differs markedly from the language of advocacy. Instead of beginning with "you're wrong" or "that won't work," we might say, "I can see why you feel that way, and I have a different perspective I'd like to share." Instead of dismissing concerns, we acknowledge them. "That's a valid concern, and here's how I think we might address it." This approach does not require us to agree with everything we hear or to abandon our own convictions. Rather, it asks us to hold our convictions in a way that invites dialogue rather than defensive reactions. It requires what Daniel Siegel calls integration, the ability to honor both our own truth and the truth of others, seeking solutions that respect multiple perspectives rather than demanding singular victories. The practical application of Habit 5 extends far beyond interpersonal relationships into the realm of leadership and organizational effectiveness. Leaders who practice empathetic listening discover something remarkable. People begin to tell them the truth. In environments where listening is practiced consistently, employee engagement increases, innovation flourishes, and conflicts are resolved more quickly and completely. Consider the healthcare setting where miscommunication can have life or death consequences. Studies show that medical errors often result not from lack of clinical knowledge, but from failures in communication. When healthcare teams practice empathetic listening, truly hearing patient concerns, family fears, and colleague observations, medical outcomes improve dramatically. The same principle applies in education, where teachers who listen empathetically to student struggles create learning environments where academic performance soars. In the business world, organizations that embed empathetic listening into their culture consistently outperform their competitors. Customer service ratings improve when representatives truly listen to customer concerns rather than simply following scripts. Innovation increases when team members feel safe sharing unconventional ideas. Mergers and acquisitions succeed more often when leaders take time to understand the cultures and concerns of both organizations. The ripple effects extend into our most intimate relationships. Marriages strengthened by empathetic listening report higher satisfaction, greater longevity, and more effective conflict resolution. Children raised by parents who practice deep listening demonstrate higher emotional intelligence, stronger communication skills, and greater resilience in facing life's challenges. Yet perhaps the most profound transformation occurs within ourselves. When we practice empathetic listening consistently, we develop what researchers call perspective-taking ability, the capacity to see situations from multiple viewpoints simultaneously. This cognitive flexibility makes us better problem solvers, more creative thinkers, and more effective collaborators. We also develop greater emotional regulation. When we understand that most human behavior stems from unmet needs rather than malicious intent, we become less reactive and more responsive. Road rage transforms into compassion for someone having a difficult day. Workplace conflicts become opportunities for understanding rather than battles to be won. Family tensions become invitations for deeper connection rather than reasons for withdrawal. The journey toward mastering Habit 5 is lifelong. It requires constant vigilance against our natural tendencies toward autobiography, the unconscious habit of interpreting others' experiences through the lens of our own. It demands that we stay curious in the face of certainty, patient in moments of frustration, and vulnerable in situations where defensiveness feels safer. The rewards, however, are immeasurable. In a world growing increasingly polarized, those who master empathetic listening become bridges between divided communities. In organizations struggling with communication breakdowns, they become catalysts for collaboration. In relationships strained by misunderstanding, they become healers of connection. This is more than a communication technique or leadership strategy. It is a way of being in the world that recognizes the fundamental interconnectedness of human experience. When we truly understand others, we discover that beneath the surface differences of opinion, cultural background, or life experience, we share remarkably similar needs: to be heard, to be valued, to be understood, to matter. The practice begins now in your next conversation. Will you listen to reply, or will you listen to understand? Will you wait for your turn to speak, or will you create space for genuine dialogue? Will you judge quickly, or will you stay curious about the human being before you? The choice is yours, and in that choice lies the power to transform not just your relationships, but the world, one conversation at a time. For in the end, the quality of our communication determines the quality of our lives, and the depth of our listening determines the depth of our connections. This is the promise and the practice of Habit 5 that by seeking first to understand, we create a world where everyone, including ourselves, can finally, truly be understood.